as you guys know, I've been really enjoying my adventures with Superman. Did my review for the first 2 episodes, which was pretty much like a part 1 and part 2, kind of reintroducing us to the character. And yeah, as I said before, it's just been such a refreshing take on Superman and his respective supporting players. Again, I've been kind of disappointed by how the character's been treated theatrically, but we have been getting some good Superman content over the last few years. Obviously, Superman and Lois kind of brings the wholesomeness and the kindness back to the character, and that is exactly the same case for My Adventures of Superman, which is very much an anime-inspired, take on Superman. And, I'm primarily focusing on these next 2 episodes, episode 3 and 4. Mostly want to talk about episode 4 because I think there's just a lot more development in that episode, though I will mention aspects of episode 3. But if anyone needs like a synopsis so far for these kind of for these, the next 2 episodes 3 and 4, Superman is continuing to prove his commitment to the people of Metropolis, even though Lois Lane is constantly, pursuing him for an interview. And our trio of reporters, Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen, they kind of get their first assignment to interview Dr. Ivo and other socialites at a presentation for a dangerous piece of technology. It can change the face of the world itself. And both these episodes, chat, I think are quite good. Obviously, if episode 3, we're introduced to more different interpretations of Superman's Rogues Gallery. In this case, it's Intergain. And these guys are basically they're like D-list characters who are given very dangerous powers that they should not have, and they're just so inept that, like, well, we kind of spent our entire lives just ripping off convenience stores and things, so let's just rob a bank. And of course, that just goes absolutely, wrong in the episode. And of course, outside of the introduction of these new enemies and this technology that they should not have, we constantly have like just Lois Lane trying to get that Superman interview, and Clark just kind of wanting to avoid that because he's concerned, because he doesn't want his identity exposed. He wants to, protect Metropolis, and he feels like he won't be able to do that, with his identity out there. That's basically a big part of his anxiety. But we can continuously see the interactions between Clark and Lois, even in this episode, and it's adorable. It's really cute. It's really adorable. And then with Jimmy Olsen kind of thrown in the mix, and like just very aware that like, you two are fall in love with each other. Kind of poking fun at that. That's very fun. And we get some cool introductions to Superman's powers. Like again, they're not just regurgitating. They're not just regurgitating the origin where it's like, hey, we're going to do Krypton again, and we're going to do, him being raised in the farm. It's like we do have occasionally flashbacks to that. Not so much Krypton, because that's still a mystery. Like, he still doesn't even know about Krypton or Jor-El or his mother or anything about Krypton society. He's like, the question he's always asking is like, who am I? And so they kind of like introducing us to the origin. They have like sections of the episodes with like an origin-esque feature every so often. So in this case, we're kind of just be reintroduced to like his abilities that we're so used to seeing. So for this particular episode, we see him discover his heat vision and him utilizing that. Not even I guess to a degree in battle, but mostly to help people. So that was really fun, and I thought original. This wasn't just to blast monsters or to blast like Intergain. It actually serves a purpose to help people and make sure that they are not harmed, which was nice. Again, it's used to seeing Superman uses heat vision in live action, and he's melting people's faces and cutting people's heads off, and I'm just like, it's kind of cool to see the heat vision used in a very practical way. So that was nice. So episode 3 I thought was very fun. It continues to play up the Lois and Clark and Superman relationship, and Clark being concerned about how he has to approach Lois, in certain ways. And it basically ends with like Lois getting that interview, but of course, it's so funny how the interview happens. And she's asking me all these like questions like, how do you get your powers? Where are you from? And Clark's like, or Superman's like, I don't know. I don't know how I got my powers. I don't know where I'm from. And it's really, really charming because she's like, what are you talking about? And then it's revealed that he's lying. He's a liar. He's a filthy liar. I'm going to expose all his secrets. And Clark's like, oh, no. But you know what? It's really episode 4 that I loved. Because now we're really getting deep into these relationships between all these characters. Also introducing us to very different takes on Superman's rogues gallery. They're being very experimental. And I could see where that will probably piss off a lot of people. At this point, I'm like, let's just try something different. I don't mind that. You know, it's like, hey, if you get just the core, my whole thing is, if you get the core ideas for these characters right, then you can be more experimental with who's who and, where they came from, all that. I'm fine. Just get the core elements right and we can move on and tell me and show me the story you want to do. And so far, I think they've been doing a good job. And that is certainly the case with, Dr. Ivo, which, for people in the comics, or people who have read the comics, Dr. Ivo, or seen some adaptations, he is this old man that makes killer robots. That's basically what he does. You've probably seen him in Young Justice. You've seen one of his creations in Batman Under the Red Hood. He's probably his big claim to fame is making a Mazo, this android that Superman, Batman, many other characters have fought. There's been many iterations on Amazo over the years. And in this particular episode, they make Dr. Ivo, Professor Ivo, he's actually a very young man. And he's more based on like those Silicon Valley tech bros. Like he even has like a man bun and everything. And he's obnoxious. And he's very reminiscent of almost like Tony Stark. And I was like, whoa, first I'm like, wait, this is him? I didn't expect that. But I thought it worked. I thought it worked for the entire episode, and they play around with like who he becomes. Like yes, even though he's Dr. Ivo, he becomes a whole other Superman villain in this episode, and how that initially starts. I thought was like, oh, that's a little interesting. If it getting very Iron Man-esque. And then we get to a part that is just filled to the brim with body horror that I just did not. Again, this show has been like very cute, very adorable, really, wholesome. It's definitely been indulging in those kind of like slice of life. And I mean, so much of this, and I can see this maybe being a turnoff to some people. It feels like it's inspired by a lot of slice of life anime, like Silver Spoon, stuff like that, right? And there is just a scene that is straight out of a horror movie. It's like, oh, where it freaked me out. I just did not expect it, chat. And all I'll say is someone gets messed up, and I'm just like, you're never going to be normal again. You're just going to be a disgusting looking abomination person for the rest of your life. And you brought it on yourself. And when it happens, it's like, ooh, and then it's like, oh, and he becomes this villain now. It's like that was really clever. I liked it because I didn't expect it. I simply didn't expect it. But the other aspect of this episode I love is all the scenes between Clark and Lois. As I said, chat, they are adorable, and now they're getting to the point where they are like adamant about being romantically involved with each other. And because I was kind of worried initially that like, we just kind of not that I don't like it. I like the how they're very cute around each other and they're flirting and it's very subtly and they're like, I don't know if I should flirt with you. Here it's like, all right, forget that. Listen, we've moved on from accidentally bumping into each other's, big old biddies. We've gone on to hand touching, and now, chat, we've gotten to smooching. We've gotten to smooching and kisses on the cheek, and Clark taking his big jacket and putting on Lois, who's so cold, and even like the subtlety when they're like when they start taking off their clothes, like there's scenes where they're taking off their clothes in this episode, chat. They're not shtupping quite yet, but they're almost there. They're just one more episode away from that. But when they react to each other's bodies, and you're like, oh my God. both when Lois sees Clark, but also when Clark sees Lois. When they start showing some skin, oh my God, it's like they got to start fanning themselves. They're getting the vapors. And all those moments are great. And even though it's like, yeah, they're making cutesy eyes at each other and they're clearly lusting over each other's respective bodies, we do get some more backstory, especially with Lois Lane, who, again, Alice Lee, like Jack Quaid, of course, voices Clark and Superman. He's doing a fantastic job, loving what he's bringing to both respective, characters, right? But Alice Lee is Lois. She's been great. She's just like, she's spunky. She's a bundle of energy, but she also, as I said in the previous 2 episodes, she has these quiet moments where she is more introspective and she realizes like, oh, like the way I acted wasn't right. And I don't want to mistreat my friends. And that's very ever present in her mind. But here we get a little backstory, like with her family and her father, and like, you know, Clark, who obviously is attracted to her. He's like actually listening to her and being kind to her, and she feels like a safe space, you know, for her to talk about these things with him. And I was like, oh my God, this is happening all in this episode with all these crazy villains and shenanigans. And it's like we have a moment to do these character beats, and I think it's been great. But then we also can have the humor where there's this funny. There's one scene where you know, Clark, he gets thrown out of the party because, you know, Lois initially goes to this event. You know, they're sent by Perry White, who wants them to cover this event, and basically it's this puff piece about who's sleeping with who, and you know, Dr. Ivo is the most eligible bachelor in Metropolis. You know, who's he seeing? Like, that's what they're sent to do that, right? And Lois Lane's like, the most corrupt people in Metropolis are going to this party. We're going to interview them. And but Clark's kind of like, and, you know, she tries to do that, but it does not work. And Clark's like, maybe we should kind of go back to what we were assigned. She's like, okay. And at one point, like, Clark eventually like meets Dr. Ivo, who is just so obnoxious, and Clark gets fucking pissed. And then he's like becomes the reporter which we haven't seen that. We haven't seen Clark Kent the reporter in so long, in years, in adaptations. And we see that from in this episode. He's like really good at it. And you know, that just, it makes fucking Lois hot and bothered when she sees that. He ends up getting thrown out of the whole party, like literally thrown into a alleyway covered in garbage. And, you know, she basically goes out there, comforts him, and they're flirting back and forth, and it's adorable. And there's a scene where she's like, oh, come here, you big piece of man meat. And she drags him like, it's gonna happen. They're gonna start stumping each other in the broom closet. But that leads to like one of the most wholesome scenes in the entire episode. Also, there's like this funny gag they do with Lois where she eats like a little gremlin. Because at one point in the episode, like she gets really disenfranchised because no one wants to talk to her, and Clark like gives her some cake. And she's like, cake. And she starts eating it. And she's like a messy eater. Because at one point, like, Clark looks over and she's like trying to eat this slice of cake, and like this, it just falls on her boobies. It just falls on her bazungas, chat, like this strawberry, and it's just like sticking there. And she goes, and she just eats it. I thought that adorable. I thought that was super cute. And there's just so many scenes like that in this episode that's like, oh, it's really working for me. And there is a huge cliffhanger at the end that's gonna make, I imagine, the next few episodes really compelling. And I was like, ooh, that's going to be great. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to spoil anything. I was like, nice. Can't wait for that. And it's going to change. It's going to change character relationships to a degree. Also, two other things I want to mention. Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy Olsen, voiced by Ishmael Saeed. They're still doing the whole conspiracy stuff with him, you know, but it's not, you know what? I noticed it's not as crazy as it was, where it's like that's his dominant personality. Now they're doing it where he definitely feels, because it's interesting, because typically Jimmy's always been like kind of the third wheel, you know, or fifth wheel, whatever you want to say. In this case, third wheel. But he's noticing that Clark and Lois are spending more time with each other, and he kind of feels left out. And so I imagine that's going to play a greater role later on in these episodes, especially with everything that's happening to Cliffhanger 2. It's going to make things even more interesting. And so it's interesting that he's kind of like, he doesn't, because they've always kind of made it a gag that Jimmy's not as important, right? But here, they're actually making that a plot point and something for his development, which I'm like, oh, I'm glad they're kind of addressing this. So that was refreshing and nice. And also, they introduce a certain character who I'm thinking like, that's who you are. That's who this guy is. And I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. All I'll say is, chat, all I'll say is there's a character named Alex. And Alex is going to play I think he's going to play a huge role later on in this series. And I was like, oh, I see what they're doing here. And I like what they're doing with Alex. I thought it was very interesting. And I'm curious to see Alex's interactions with the other members of this series. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty inspired little thing that they're doing right now. But yeah, chat, so far, I think My Adventures of Superman is one of the best animated shows out there right now. I know it's not jiving with everybody. A lot of people don't like kind of the slice of life aspects of it. I love it. I love it for that. And I like its reinterpretation of supporting Superman characters, and they're doing things with the villains that are surprising to me. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and I highly recommend it, Chad. Best episode 4 Like, if you're not hooked by episode 4, maybe you drop it. But episode 4, I thought was so good. Best episode yeah. What about you guys? What do you think of My Adventures of Superman? Episodes 3 and 4.
I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.